Given the ties that you now hold with Rakai, we want to make sure that you and these community partners are ready and that these transitional challenges go smoothly. It's important to remember that nearly 20 years ago, the community of Rakai also began on a journey. They had a vision. They had a calling. And those messages were expressed to World Vision staff in those early 1 and 2 years as they began to sit together in the dirt and dream what their community would be like. These were conversations with the community's children, with families, with civic and tribal leaders, with government leaders. And those of you who have a long history with Rakai will remember that the project began with this 2-year process. Not only to understand the viability of the community structures already present, but also to hear the community and what their priorities were. Transformational development, if it's to be successful, is about empowering community members to claim not only their needs, but also to prioritize them and to begin to help you work out solutions. World Vision brought some underlying understanding about the root causes of poverty that collude with various issues like AIDS to kill a community's health and their resolve. And like these messages that are given from the pulpit regularly at this church, we began to work with them to find solutions. Solutions that were both physical, social, but also spiritual in nature. The financial arrangements were pretty straightforward. Your gifts in the form of sponsorship dollars would create a revolving capital or revolving funding to keep our promise to support Rakai. You cannot imagine how important that is. In too many programs with too many organizations, and ours was certainly descriptive of this in the beginning, the idea was if I can just find a project, I can get the funding, but then I have to go back and keep looking for money to keep the promise up in the community. By engaging in things like sponsorship, we're able to keep our promise. And so now if you venture to Rakai, you begin to see things like clean water, education. You begin to see things like job security and food security. You begin to see things like health and hygiene. And of course, you also begin to see what touches on that, which is spiritual nurture, which infuses itself through many of these programs or products that have also happened in the community. When that happens, then you begin to envision and experience what many of the people who have come from this church have experienced. It's a 4-letter word. It's a good one. It's hope. And it's not just hope that they've experienced in community. And I haven't been to Rakai, but I've been to many other communities in which World Vision works. It's hope that's reciprocated. It's the reason why when I speak on HIV and someone says, with all the HIV and AIDS talking you must do, you must be one depressed guy. I got that in Bellevue last week. I said, I'm not depressed. When I'm in communities that are battling AIDS and seeing the innovations and the growth they're seeing as people come alongside them, the word I walk away with is hope. It's what keeps me going. I'm hardly depressed. Over the life of an area development program, there's a defined process that lets you know that the community is progressing toward their goal of transformation. It's easy to think that our staff just suddenly wake up one morning and go, okay, time to transition. We're out of here. That's just not the truth. Our staff and various leaders that work with us in partnerships monitor these social, transformational, physical, and spiritual measures constantly. This is what we call TDI. And I need to apologize about something in that newsletter. We gave you a little bit of insider jargon. You registered the word TDI. These are transformational development indicators, and these things have been present since the organization began in Rakai. That's why we spent 2 years sitting in the dirt. We were measuring baseline. What is it really like? Because we're not going to know improvement or preparedness to go until we're able to measure what has happened from the baseline to what we believe to be the goal. A lot of organizations don't do that. One might say we're anal retentive when it comes to measurements. That's just World Vision. But these TDIs we have been following very, very closely. And about 3 years ago, we took a very, very good look at what was going on, and we realized transition could happen in the next 2.5 years, which would say on target. This is exactly what we had hoped. I was just reviewing the last several years of growth in the community, and frankly, I was overwhelmed. I know that World Vision staff is compiling an exhaustive list of accomplishments, and I've been told that as we go further on into these 2.5 years, you're going to actually see the exhaustive list of what has happened in this community. You'll have these relationships. That will tell you success. But also you need to know practically, tangibly, pragmatically what has happened. What has been left behind? What is the structure of the platform on which this community is going to build? For the purposes of our discussion, there's a critical measurement done every 5 years, and that is what happened 2.5 years ago. In this process, World Vision met exhaustively with these community stakeholders, and we came away with just this sense of joy that not only the community got it, but we got it, and then, of course, we want to communicate with our sponsors as well, that we're ready to transition, but we're going to take time. We're going to go slowly. Now, I can imagine some questions come up at this point. Why aren't you checking this more than every 5 years? You do this every 5 years. Why don't you do it more? It's a little bit like planting if you are gardeners. If you pull a plant out too much to look at how the roots are growing, the plant will eventually die. It's an incredible work for staff to turn from being staff workers within the community and now become measurement people. It's hard on the staff, it's hard on the community. It's also one in which if you do it every year, you can't measure growth well. And so every 5 years, that gives us a chance to really test the water. Is this where we want to be? And so at the 10-year mark, that's what we did. We looked very, very carefully. Is this community empowered to the point that in a certain amount of time, they could actually stand on their own? What are the indicators? You saw this in some of the material that we gave you in that newsletter, and that was a wonderful newsletter. My family just got it. I didn't see it, actually. I was about getting on the plane last night, packing my bags, which is my want, usually late. And my wife said, okay, now this is the one you're going to a dine. I said, yeah. And she goes, did you get the newsletter? Because we get your newsletter. Justine Nakapuku is our sponsor child. And I said, no, I hadn't seen that yet. So she handed it to me. And it was powerful, because I was learning some things, the way in which we had stated that. What are the indicators? The indicators were pretty clear in the newsletter. The well-being of children is critical to us. The empowering of children as agents of change is important to us. Transformed relationships is important to us. Again, it's that relationship with God, relationship with each other. And lest we forget, we're in a Reformed faith, relationship with the earth is important. Those three things have to be resident before we leave. Independent, empowered community has to be there. In other words, associations. I find this the most important thing that we do. It's usually the thing you see the least of when you go into a community. Alex de Tocqueville, in his famous book, Democracy in America, with this young 20-year-old coming from France, seeing the American experiment as it was just starting. The most dominant thought in that book, which you read at Western Civ in high school or college, the most dominant thought is him coming back and saying, when I look across the American experiment, what do I see? I don't see guilds like we have in Europe. What I see, in the case of survival and building to self-sustainability, I see people building associations about everything. In most poor communities, they're not poor because of economic injustice. Typically, they're poor because of a lack of proper relationships. And what World Vision is very good at doing, and you've watched it and you've been a part of it, is joining people with each other around all sorts of things, and so connective tissue begins. And when that happens, they have a platform in which they can begin to address their government, begin to address outsiders, begin to address needs with the earth. Well, these tests were conducted in external evaluation by outside CBOs, community-based organizations. There's another word that you heard in that newsletter that wasn't translated, and I apologize for that. But these outside organizations began to look, and they began to discover some things, and they said, I think we're ready. Was the report perfect? No. I just was looking at one of the things. I noticed that some of the boreholes are non-functioning. So what do? Do we go build more boreholes in the next 2.5 years? Not if you have a self-sustaining kind of mindset or an empowering mindset. They said, obviously they're plugged up because people haven't been maintaining them well. And so we're going to go back to those holes that are plugged up, and we're going to pull the community back out, and we're going to retool and retrain until we have ownership of the process again, and then we're going to step back again. Sound like child rearing? Sound like raising up a new employee? Sound like training? Yes, because that's what it is. And then we're going to empower them to use the wells they already have, because they have enough wells. They're going to be okay.